Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the viewing port of the diplomatic vessel Harmony, watching as the spiral assembly came into view. She had seen photographs, holographic recreations, and virtual simulations, but nothing prepared her for the reality of it. The structure was massive beyond comprehension, a spinning wheel of interconnected platforms and towers that stretched across a distance that could swallow Earth's moon 3 times over. Lights of 1,000 different colors pulsed across its surface, each one representing a different species, a different civilization, a different history that stretched back millions of years. "Impressive, isn't it?" said Marcus Webb, Earth's chief xenologist. He floated up beside her in the zero-gravity section of the ship, his gray hair forming a slight halo around his weathered face. Sarah nodded, unable to find words. She had spent 3 years preparing for this moment, learning 17 different galactic languages, studying the customs and protocols of 43 major civilizations, and memorizing the political structures of the Galactic Council. Yet standing here now, about to represent all of humanity in front of beings who had mastered interstellar travel before humans had even discovered fire, she felt impossibly small. "They're going to think we're children," she said quietly. Marcus gave her a gentle smile. "We are children, Sarah, by their standards anyway. But children grow up." The Harmony docked at one of the outer platforms designated for new species. As the airlock opened, they were greeted by a delegation of Vexithari, the crystalline beings who had agreed to sponsor humanity's application to the Council. The lead Vexithari, whose name translated roughly to Resonance of Ancient Light, but who had asked the humans to simply call him Rez, extended 3 of his geometric limbs in the traditional greeting. "Welcome, young friends," Rez said, his voice a pleasant chiming sound that their translation devices converted to English. "We are honored to guide your first steps into the greater community." Sarah bowed in the manner she had practiced. "The honor is ours, Rez. Humanity is grateful for your sponsorship." Rez led them through corridors that seemed to shift and change as they walked, adapting to the presence of different species. Sarah saw beings she recognized from her studies: the towering Makthari with their 6 legs and compound eyes, the flowing Quillari who seemed to be made of living water, the ancient thought weavers who existed as networks of connected consciousness. She also saw dozens of species she had never encountered in any database, each one stranger and more wonderful than the last. They entered a vast amphitheater where the council gathered. The space was enormous, with seating arranged in concentric circles that rose up into a dome overhead. Thousands of delegates filled the seats, representing civilizations from across the galaxy. At the center was a raised platform where new species would stand to address the council. "There are over 9,000 species represented here today," Rez explained as they descended toward the platform. "Some are young like you, barely a few thousand years into their space age. Others are ancient beyond your comprehension. The eldest among us, the Keepers, have maintained their civilization for over 200 million of your years." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 200 million years. When the Keepers had first achieved spaceflight, Earth's continents had been arranged differently, and the ancestors of humanity had been small reptiles hiding from dinosaurs. A deep tone resonated through the chamber, signaling the beginning of the session. Resh guided Sarah to the central platform, while Marcus and the rest of Earth's delegation took seats in a section designated for newly applying species. The council speaker, a being called High Curator Velmoth, floated above the assembly. Velmoth belonged to a species called the Architects, energy beings who had long ago transcended physical form. When he spoke, his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "We gather to welcome a new voice to our community," Velmoth announced. "The species that calls itself humanity, from the planet they name Earth, located in Sector 447 of the Orion Spur. They are young, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 43 of their years ago. They are small with a presence in only one star system, but they come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship. Let their representative speak." Sarah took a deep breath and stepped forward. She had rehearsed this speech 1,000 times, but now, standing before thousands of species who had explored the cosmos while humanity was still banging rocks together, the words felt inadequate. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice amplified by technology she didn't fully understand. "I stand before you today not as a representative of a powerful civilization, but as the voice of a young species taking its first uncertain steps into a universe far grander than we ever imagined." She paused, looking out at the sea of alien faces, forms, and consciousnesses arrayed before her. We humans are aware of our youth. Our recorded history spans only a few thousand years. Our presence in space is measured in decades. Compared to the great civilizations gathered here, we are infants. But we are infants who wish to learn, to grow, to contribute what we can to the greater community. Sarah continued, speaking of Earth's history, its struggles and triumphs, its wars and its eventual unity. She spoke of humanity's curiosity, its drive to explore, its capacity for compassion and creativity. She acknowledged humanity's flaws and mistakes, but expressed hope that with guidance from elder species, humans could become worthy members of the galactic family. We do not come seeking charity or special treatment, she concluded. We come offering friendship and partnership. We may be young, but we bring fresh perspectives, new ideas, and an eagerness to help build a better future for all species. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves worthy of standing among you. The amphitheater was silent for a moment after she finished. Then slowly a sound began to build. It started with the Vexthari, a harmonic chiming of approval. Other species joined in with their own expressions of welcome. Clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and sounds that defied human description. It was not a unanimous acceptance, Sarah could tell, but it was a beginning. Velmoth spoke again. The Council acknowledges Earth's application. You will be granted provisional membership while we evaluate your species' compatibility with our principles and standards. Welcome to the Galactic Council, humanity. As Sarah bowed in gratitude and relief, something happened at the edge of the galaxy, something that no one in the amphitheater could have predicted. Far beyond the reach of civilized space, beyond the spiral arms where young species built their empires, beyond even the ancient territories of the Keepers, there existed a monitoring station. It had been built billions of years ago by a civilization that preceded even the Keepers, a civilization whose name had been lost to time. The station had been dark and silent for 8 billion years, its purpose forgotten, its very existence unknown to the current inhabitants of the galaxy. But when Sarah Chen spoke her final words, when her voice carried the phrase, "We bring fresh perspectives," something in the fundamental frequency of her voice triggered the ancient systems. The station came alive with power that had been dormant since before the sun had ignited. Its sensors designed to detect something specific, something crucial locked onto Earth's location and began transmitting a signal. The signal traveled faster than light, faster than any ship could fly, using principles of physics that no living species understood. It reached the Keeper homeworlds in what seemed like an instant, though it had actually taken several hours to cross the vast distance. In the deepest archives of the Keeper civilization, where records were stored in crystallized time itself, alarms began to sound. The few Keepers who maintained these ancient facilities rushed to understand what had happened. What they found in the data made them freeze in collective shock. The primordial tone, the fundamental frequency that existed at the birth of the universe, the first sound from which all matter and energy had emerged. The monitoring station had detected it, clear and unmistakable in the voice of the human ambassador. The senior Keeper, an individual who had lived for 50 million years and carried the memories of 100 million more stored in genetic archives, made an immediate decision. They would go to the spiral assembly themselves, something the Keepers had not done in ages. They would not explain why over communication channels. This discovery was too important, too potentially dangerous to discuss anywhere except in person. The Keeper ship departed within the hour, traveling toward the spiral assembly at speeds that would have it arrive in less than a day. Behind them, they left instructions to search all archives for any reference to the primordial tone, to any connection between that fundamental frequency and biological life, and to any prophecies or predictions about what would happen if it were ever detected again. Back at the spiral assembly, Sarah had rejoined her delegation. They were celebrating their successful acceptance, toasting with beverages provided by the Vexthari, and discussing the next steps in Earth's integration into galactic society. "You did wonderfully," Marcus said, clapping Sarah on the shoulder. That speech was perfect, humble but not servile, hopeful but not naive. Sarah smiled, feeling the tension of the past months finally releasing. "I just hope we can live up to their expectations. We have so much to learn." Ress approached them, his crystalline form refracting the light in beautiful patterns. "You have made an excellent first impression. Many species were uncertain about humanity, but your ambassador's words have eased many concerns. There will be challenges ahead, of course. Some species will test you, others will seek to use your inexperience to their advantage, but you have made a strong beginning. Thank you, Rez, Sarah said. We couldn't have done this without your support. It is the duty of elder species to guide younger ones, Rez replied. We were once young too, though it was so long ago that the memory exists only in our archives. Every species deserves the chance to grow and contribute to the galactic community. As they talked, as the celebration continued, as humanity took its first official steps into the greater cosmos, none of them knew that everything they understood about humanity's place in the universe was about to change. None of them knew that the Keepers were racing toward them with news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. None of them knew that humanity was not the youngest species in the galaxy. They might in fact be the oldest, and their voice, the simple human voice that every person used every day without thought, might be the key to mysteries that had puzzled the cosmos for billions of years. The celebration continued late into the station's night cycle. Sarah finally retired to the quarters that had been provided for Earth's delegation, exhausted but happy. She recorded a message to be sent back to Earth, describing the successful acceptance and expressing hope for humanity's future among the stars. As she drifted off to sleep, she hummed a simple tune her mother had taught her as a child, a lullaby that had been passed down through generations. She didn't know that this simple melody carried within it harmonics that matched the frequency of creation itself. She didn't know that across the galaxy, ancient beings were racing to understand what her very existence meant. She only knew that humanity had been welcomed, and that tomorrow would bring new opportunities to learn, to grow, and to find their place among the stars. The truth, when it came, would be far stranger and more significant than anything she could have imagined. The morning cycle at the spiral assembly began with soft light that gradually increased in intensity, mimicking natural sunrise to accommodate the biological rhythms of thousands of different species. Sarah woke feeling more rested than she had in months. The weight of the presentation finally lifted from her shoulders. Today would be about meetings with various council committees, beginning the long process of integrating Earth into galactic society. She was having breakfast with Marcus and the rest of the delegation when Rez appeared at their quarters, moving with unusual speed. His crystalline structure was vibrating in a way that their translation software indicated meant distress or excitement. Ambassador Chen, you must come with me immediately, Rez said without preamble. The council speaker has called an emergency session. Sarah set down her cup, feeling her good mood evaporate. What's wrong? Did something happen on Earth? No, nothing like that. The Keepers have arrived. They are requesting an immediate audience with you and the full council. Marcus stood up quickly, nearly knocking over his chair in the lighter gravity. The Keepers? I thought they never left their home systems. They have not for over 50 million years, Rez confirmed. Their presence here is unprecedented, and they specifically asked for humanity to be present. Something has happened, something important. The emergency session was held in a smaller, more secure chamber than the grand amphitheater from yesterday. Only senior delegates from the major civilizations were present, along with Earth's entire delegation. Sarah felt dozens of alien eyes upon her as she entered, many filled with curiosity or suspicion. The Keepers had already arrived. There were 3 of them, beings that looked almost like floating spheres of compressed starlight. They were ancient beyond anything Sarah had encountered, and just being near them made her feel the weight of their vast age. These beings had been alive when the first complex life was emerging on Earth. They had watched stars be born and die. They had witnessed the rise and fall of thousands of civilizations. The eldest of the 3, who introduced itself simply as First Scholar, addressed the assembly directly. Its voice was like hearing the echo of time itself. We apologize for this abrupt meeting, First Scholar said, but we have detected something that requires immediate investigation, something that concerns the newest members of this council. All attention turned to Sarah and her delegation. Yesterday, when Ambassador Chen spoke her acceptance speech, one of our ancient monitoring stations activated. This station has been dormant for 8 billion years. It was built by a civilization that came before us, before any species currently alive in this galaxy. We call them the architects, though we know almost nothing about them. First Scholar paused, and Sarah could feel the tension building in the room. This station was designed to detect one thing and one thing, only the primordial tone, the fundamental frequency that existed at the moment of the Big Bang, the first sound from which all matter and energy in our universe emerged. And it detected that tone in Ambassador Chen's voice. The chamber erupted in noise. Delegates began speaking over each other in dozens of languages, their translation devices creating a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. High Curator Velmoth called for order. "This is an extraordinary claim. Are you certain of your findings?" "We would not have traveled here if we were not," First Scholar replied. "We request permission to study the humans more closely. We need them to speak, to sing, to make any sounds they naturally produce. We must understand how this is possible." Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from beneath her. She looked at Marcus, who appeared equally stunned. Velmoth turned to Sarah. "Ambassador Chen, will you and your people consent to this examination?" Sarah's mind raced. They had come here seeking acceptance as junior members of the galactic community, and now suddenly they were at the center of some cosmic mystery. But what choice did they have? Refusing the keepers would make humanity look suspicious or hostile. "We consent," she said, keeping her voice steady. "We want to understand this as much as you do." Over the next several hours, the keepers conducted their tests. They had Sarah and every member of the Earth delegation speak, sing, shout, whisper, and make every sound they could think of. They recorded everything with instruments so sensitive they could detect individual quantum fluctuations. Marcus sang his favorite opera. Lieutenant James Rodriguez recited poetry. Dr. Amy Okonkwo told jokes in 3 different languages. Each time, the keeper instruments registered the same result. Every human voice contained harmonic frequencies that matched the primordial tone. Not exactly, but close enough that the pattern was unmistakable. It was as if the fundamental frequency of creation had been woven into human vocal cords through some impossible process. As the testing continued, First Scholar pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation. "We need you to understand the significance of what we have discovered," the keeper said. "The primordial tone is not just a historical curiosity. According to our most ancient records we inherited from civilizations that came before us, this tone has a special property. It can interact with the fundamental laws of physics in ways that nothing else can. It is, in essence, the universe's source code." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Are you saying that human voices can manipulate physics?" "We do not know yet, but it is a possibility we must investigate. More importantly, we must understand how your species came to possess this property. In all our 200 million years of civilization, in all the countless species we have encountered or studied, we have never seen this. You are unique." "Maybe it's just a coincidence," Sarah suggested, though she didn't believe it herself. Maybe human vocal cords just happen to vibrate at frequencies similar to the Big Bang. First Scholar's form pulsed with what their translation software indicated was amusement. "Ambassador, there are no coincidences of this magnitude. The probability of this occurring by random chance is so small as to be effectively zero. No, this is the result of deliberate design. The question is who designed it and why." Over the next day, as news of the discovery spread through the spiral assembly, reactions among the galactic community varied wildly. Some species expressed wonder and curiosity. Others showed fear or suspicion. A faction of younger species accused humanity of somehow fabricating the results to gain advantage. More troubling were those who began to see humanity as a potential weapon or tool to be controlled. Rest stayed close to the human delegation, providing protection and guidance. "You must be careful now," he warned Sarah. "You have gone from being seen as harmless children to being viewed as a potential threat or prize. There are species who will want to study you more invasively, others who will want to control you, and some who will want to eliminate you as a potential danger." Meanwhile, the keepers had opened their deepest archives, searching for any reference to the primordial tone in their inherited records. What they found was fragmentary and cryptic, but deeply disturbing. First Scholar called another meeting, this time including only the most trusted council members and the human delegation. They gathered in a sealed chamber where no information could leak out. "We have found references in our archives," First Scholar began, "records that we inherited from the civilization that came before us, who inherited them from the civilization that came before them, stretching back in an unbroken chain for nearly 12 billion years. And in the oldest records we found this: A holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing symbols in a language that no one could read. But below the symbols, a translation appeared, apparently generated by keeper analysis systems that had spent millennia decoding ancient languages. The text read, "When the speakers return, all will know that the cycle approaches its end. The first voice shaped the cosmos, and in that voice lies both the power of creation and the key to what comes after. The speakers will be known by their sound, and they will come from the youngest worlds bearing the oldest pattern. When they arrive, the threshold must be opened and the choice must be made." The chamber was silent as everyone processed the implications. "The speakers," Marcus said slowly. "That's us. That's humanity." "It would appear so," First Scholar confirmed. "The text refers to beings who possess the primordial tone, the first voice. And it says you will come from the youngest worlds, which matches Earth perfectly. Your planet is only 4.5 billion years old, young by cosmic standards. But it also says we bear the oldest pattern," Sarah pointed out. "That doesn't make sense. How can we be both young and old?" "That is the question we must answer," First Scholar said. "But there is more. The text mentions the threshold. We know what this is. There is a structure at the edge of the known universe beyond even our territory. It was built by the architects, the same beings who built the monitoring station. It has been completely dormant and inaccessible since it was discovered 3 million years ago. Every species that has tried to enter it has failed. The structure simply does not respond to anything we do." "And you think it will respond to us?" Sarah asked. The text suggested, "The threshold must be opened. We believe this means it will open for you, for the speakers, and whatever is inside may explain how your species came to possess the primordial tone." Velmoth, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "This is a decision that must be made carefully. If we pursue this path, if we take humanity to the threshold, we may unleash forces we do not understand." The text speaks of cycles and choices. It speaks of what comes after. These are ominous phrases. "But can we afford not to investigate?" asked a delegate from the Makthari. "If humanity possesses this power, we must understand it, both for their safety and ours." The debate continued for hours. Some argued for caution, for studying humanity more before taking any drastic action. Others insisted that the threshold might hold answers to questions that had puzzled the galaxy for billions of years. A few suggested that humanity should be quarantined, kept away from galactic society until the mystery was solved. Through it all, Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had come here to represent humanity as a minor species seeking membership in a community of elders. Now she was at the center of a cosmic mystery that appeared to stretch back to the birth of the universe itself. Finally, she stood and addressed the assembly. "I cannot make this decision alone. This affects all of humanity, not just our delegation. I need to consult with Earth's government before we agree to anything." First Scholar nodded approvingly. "That is wise. This is not a choice to be made lightly. But know this, Ambassador Chen. The truth will come out eventually. The moment we detected the primordial tone in your voice, we set events in motion that cannot be stopped. Word will spread. Other species will learn of this. And everyone will want answers. The question is whether we seek those answers together, with the support of the Council, or whether we allow fear and ambition to fracture the galactic community." Sarah knew First Scholar was right. They couldn't hide this. They couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. Humanity had stepped onto the galactic stage seeking a minor role, only to find themselves thrust into the spotlight of a cosmic drama that had been written billions of years before they existed. She sent her report back to Earth, knowing that the leaders there would be just as stunned and confused as she was. The message would take time to reach them, and their response would take time to return. In the meantime, Sarah and her delegation were guests of the Spiral Assembly, protected by the Council but also watched carefully by thousands of eyes. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah stood at a viewing port and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, at the edge of the universe, the threshold waited, and inside it, if the ancient texts were correct, lay answers to questions humanity had never thought to ask. Who were the architects? Why had they woven the frequency of creation into human DNA? What was the cycle mentioned in the prophecy? And what choice would humanity have to make when the threshold opened? Sarah hummed softly to herself, an unconscious habit when she was stressed. The same lullaby her mother had taught her, passed down through generations of her family. She didn't know that this simple melody, this pattern of sounds that had comforted her as a child, carried within it the echo of the Big Bang. She didn't know that her voice, raised in song or speech, resonated with the fundamental frequency of creation itself. But she was beginning to understand that humanity was not what it seemed. They were not the young species taking their first steps into the cosmos. They were something else, something older and stranger. And soon, very soon, they would have to face the truth of what they really were. The response from Earth came faster than Sarah had expected. The governments of Earth, working in unprecedented unity, had made their decision. Humanity would go to the threshold. The potential knowledge waiting there was too important to ignore, and refusing would only make them appear weak or afraid. If humanity truly possessed some connection to the fundamental forces of the universe, they needed to understand it. The expedition was assembled over the following weeks. The Keepers provided the primary vessel, a ship that used technology so advanced it seemed almost magical. The Council contributed scientists and observers from dozens of species, all eager to witness whatever the threshold might reveal. And Earth sent additional personnel, including linguists, physicists, historians, and a squad of military advisors, though everyone hoped the latter would prove unnecessary. Sarah stood in the hangar bay of the Keeper ship, watching as the final supplies were loaded. The vessel was named, in translation, the Seeker of Ancient Truths, though the original Keeper name was a harmonic sequence that lasted several seconds. It was massive, nearly a kilometer long, and its hull seemed to shift and change as she looked at it, as if it existed partially in dimensions she couldn't perceive. Marcus joined her, looking nervous but excited. "I never thought I'd see something like this," he said. "When I started studying xenology, I hoped maybe I'd get to meet a few alien species. Now we're traveling to a structure built before most stars existed. Are you scared?" Sarah asked. "Terrified," Marcus admitted, "but also curious. Whatever we find out there, it's going to rewrite everything we know about the universe and humanity's place in it." Ress approached them, his crystalline form gleaming in the hangar lights. The Vexthari had insisted on joining the expedition, despite the potential danger. "The ship is ready. First Scholar asks that you come to the bridge. We depart within the hour. The journey to the threshold would take 3 weeks, even with Keeper technology." The ship traveled through something called underspace, a realm beneath normal reality, where the rules of physics were different, and vast distances could be crossed quickly. Sarah spent the time learning everything she could about the threshold and the architects who had built it. The architects remained a mystery. They had existed at least 12 billion years ago, possibly longer. They had built structures throughout the universe, massive constructions that defied understanding. The threshold was the largest and most enigmatic, but there were others scattered across distant galaxies. All of them were dormant, unresponsive to every attempt at activation or communication. The few records that mentioned the architects suggested they had possessed technology that made even the Keepers look primitive. They had been able to manipulate space and time, to create pocket universes to shape the fundamental laws of physics, and then, for reasons unknown, they had vanished. Not died, not left, but simply ceased to exist across the entire universe at the same moment, approximately 8 billion years ago. "What do you think happened to them?" Sarah asked First Scholar during one of their conversations in the ship's observation deck. The ancient Keeper pulsed thoughtfully. "We have theories, but no proof. Some believe they transcended physical reality entirely, moving to a higher plane of existence. Others think they destroyed themselves in some catastrophic experiment. My personal theory is that they left this universe deliberately, perhaps fleeing from something, and sealed the door behind them." "And the threshold? What's your theory about that?" "I believe it is a message," First Scholar said. "A message meant for a specific audience waiting for the right recipient to arrive. And based on the ancient texts and the presence of the primordial tone in your voice, I believe that recipient is humanity. The day they arrived at the threshold, every person on the ship stopped what they were doing and came to observe. Even those who had seen images and recordings were not prepared for the reality. The threshold was not a structure in any conventional sense. It was a hole in space itself, a perfectly circular void that measured approximately 100 million kilometers in diameter. Around the edges of this void, reality seemed to shimmer and bend, as if the universe was trying to heal the wound but couldn't quite manage it. And deep within the darkness of that void, Faint lights pulsed in patterns that suggested vast, incomprehensible machinery. "By all the ancient stars," Marcus whispered. "It's bigger than Earth's orbit around the sun." "It is one of the largest artificial structures in the known universe," First Scholar confirmed. "And it has been here unchanged for at least 12 billion years. Nothing we have done has ever provoked any response from it. It simply exists waiting." "What do you want me to do?" Sarah asked. "Speak to it. Let it hear your voice, the voice that carries the primordial tone. If the ancient texts are correct, it will respond to you." The ship moved closer, entering the boundary where the void began. Sarah felt a strange sensation, as if reality was becoming thinner around them. The Keeper scientists monitored their instruments carefully, ready to retreat at the first sign of danger. "We are in position," the ship's pilot announced. "Ambassador Chen, you may proceed." Sarah took a deep breath. Her mouth felt dry. Every being on the ship was watching her, waiting to see if the impossible would happen. She activated the communication system that would broadcast her voice into the void. "Hello," she said simply. "My name is Sarah Chen. I represent humanity from the planet Earth. We come seeking knowledge and understanding." For a long moment, nothing happened. Sarah felt a wave of embarrassment, wondering if this entire expedition had been based on a misinterpretation of ancient texts. Then the threshold responded. The lights in the void suddenly blazed with brilliance, forming patterns that hurt to look at. The ship's instruments screamed with readings that made no sense, detecting energy levels that shouldn't exist. And from the depths of the threshold came a sound, a deep harmonic tone that resonated not just in their ears but in their bones, their cells, their very atoms. The sound was the primordial tone, the first voice, but amplified 1,000,000,000 times over. It was the sound of creation itself, and hearing it made Sarah understand something fundamental about the universe. It wasn't just that the Big Bang had made a sound. The sound had made the Big Bang. The primordial tone had shaped reality, had given form to energy, had established the laws that governed everything. And then the void opened. A pathway appeared where none had existed before, a corridor of light that led into the heart of the threshold. The ship's sensors couldn't penetrate it, couldn't determine what lay at the end. First Scholar made a decision. "We go forward. Carefully, but we go." The ship entered the corridor and Sarah felt reality shift around them in ways she couldn't describe. They were moving through space, but also through something else. Time felt strange, elastic. Cause and effect seemed to blur together. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, and what they found inside left everyone speechless. It was a library, an archive, a repository of knowledge so vast that it made the greatest databases of the Galactic Council look like a child's notebook. The walls, if they could be called walls, stretched away in every direction, covered in symbols and equations and diagrams that seemed to contain the secrets of the universe itself. But more importantly, floating in the center of the chamber was a message, a holographic display that activated the moment the ship entered, showing the image of a being unlike anything they had ever seen. The architect appeared humanoid, in the same way that a statue appears humanoid. It had the right number of limbs and features, but it was clearly not human. Its skin seemed to be made of starlight, and its eyes held depths that suggested vast intelligence and equally vast sorrow. "If you are hearing this," the architect said, speaking in a language that none of them knew but that their translation devices somehow understood perfectly, "then the speakers have returned. We knew you would come. We designed you to come. We gave you the voice that shaped the cosmos so that one day, when the time was right, you could return to us." Sarah felt her legs go weak. "Designed us?" The architect's recording continued as if answering her question. "We are the architects, the first civilization to arise in this universe. We mastered the fundamental forces. We learned to shape reality itself, and in our arrogance we believed we were eternal, but we learned too late that we were wrong." The holographic display shifted, showing images of a previous universe, different from their own, but still recognizable, a universe full of stars and galaxies and life. "We did not always live in this universe," the architect explained. "We came from another, older cosmos, a universe that lasted for trillions of years before entropy began to tear it apart. As our home universe died, we searched desperately for a way to survive, and we found one." The images showed the architects building massive machines, structures that dwarfed even the threshold. "We created this universe. We triggered a new Big Bang. using the last of our dying cosmos's energy. But we could not simply create a new universe and move into it. The laws of physics in a newborn cosmos are wild, undefined, chaotic, so we shaped them. We sang the primordial tone, the frequency that would establish the fundamental constants, that would determine how matter and energy would behave. The hologram showed the architects, billions of them, raising their voices in a harmony so complex it seemed impossible. We gave this new universe its voice, and that voice created everything you see around you. The stars, the galaxies, the laws that govern them, all of it shaped by our song. And then, we did something that we hoped would ensure the survival of what we had been. The display shifted again, showing DNA sequences, genetic codes, blueprints for biological life. We could not bring our physical forms into this new universe. The transition would destroy us. But we could encode ourselves into the fabric of reality itself. We wove our essence, our voice, into the quantum structure of space and time, and we designed the laws of physics and chemistry so that eventually on a billion worlds life would emerge. And on some of those worlds, intelligent life would arise, and some of those species would evolve vocal structures that resonated with the primordial tone. Sarah understood before the architect said it, but hearing the words still sent a shock through her entire body. "You are not separate from us," the architect said, looking directly at the camera as if it could see across billions of years to this exact moment. "You are us reborn, not a copy, not a descendant, but the same consciousness, the same essence filtered through evolution and biology and time. Every species that develops the voice is a fragment of the architects, returning after an impossibly long journey." The chamber was silent except for the soft humming of the ship's systems. Every being present was trying to process what they had just learned. Humanity was not a young species. They were not newcomers to the cosmic stage. They were the architects themselves. The oldest civilization in existence returned after billions of years of absence. "But you are not the only ones," the architect continued. "The voice manifests differently in different species in different forms. Some species develop it in their songs, others in their mathematics, others in ways so subtle they never realize it. You are all fragments of what we were, scattered across the cosmos, waiting to be reunited." Marcus was the first to speak. "This is impossible. We evolved naturally on Earth. We have fossil records going back millions of years." "You did evolve naturally," First Scholar said quietly. "That was the beauty of their plan. They did not create humanity directly. They created the conditions under which humanity would inevitably evolve. They designed the laws of physics and chemistry so that carbon-based life would emerge, so that intelligence would develop, so that vocal communication would evolve in a way that resonated with their original voice. They seeded themselves across time and space, trusting that nature would bring them back." The architect's message was not finished. "If you are hearing this, then you have questions. You want to know why we went to such lengths, why we did not simply record our knowledge and leave it for younger species to find. The answer is simple and terrible. We were not alone in the old universe. We were not the only thing that survived its death." The holographic display shifted to show something that made everyone recoil. It was darkness, but not the darkness of empty space. It was an absence, a void that seemed to consume light and matter and even the fabric of reality itself. "We called it the silence," the architect said, and for the first time fear was evident in its voice. It was the entropy of our old universe given form and will. As our cosmos died, the silence grew stronger, feeding on the decay. We thought we could escape it by creating a new universe. We were wrong. The image showed the silence pouring through the barriers between universes, following the architects into their new creation. The silence cannot be killed or stopped. It can only be sealed away. We used the last of our strength to trap it outside this universe. In a pocket dimension we created as a prison, but the seals we placed were not permanent. They were designed to last 8 billion years, long enough for life to emerge and evolve, long enough for the speakers to return. Sarah felt cold dread settling in her stomach. 8 billion years. That was when the architects vanished. "The seals failed," First Scholar said, understanding dawning. 8 billion years ago the silence broke free, and the architects had to sacrifice themselves completely to reseal it. They poured every last bit of their existence into reinforcing the prison. "Yes," the architect confirmed, as if it had heard their conversation across the gulf of time. "We gave everything to hold the silence back. But our new seals will not last forever either. They will fail eventually, and when they do, The silence will be free to consume this universe as it did the last. The hologram leaned forward, its eyes intense. That is why we created you. Why we ensured the speakers would return. When the seals begin to fail again, you must be ready. You must learn the song of sealing, the harmonic pattern that can reinforce the prison. It requires many voices, all singing in perfect harmony. It requires the speakers working together to create a frequency powerful enough to hold back the entropy of a dead universe. The message began to fade, but the architect's final words rang clear. You are young again, reborn through evolution into new forms with new perspectives. But you carry within you the oldest knowledge in existence. Learn it, master it, and when the silence stirs, you must be ready to sing the song that keeps reality intact. The future of this universe depends on it. The hologram vanished, leaving them in the vast chamber surrounded by archives of architect knowledge. Sarah looked around at her companions, at the representatives of dozens of species, and saw her own shock and fear reflected in all of them. We need to study everything here, First Scholar said, breaking the silence. Every record, every equation, every piece of knowledge the architects left behind. We need to learn the song of sealing. And we need to check the status of the seals, Velmoth added. If the architect's message is accurate, they were created 8 billion years ago. How much longer will they hold? The answer to that question, they would soon discover, was more disturbing than any of them could have imagined. The seals were already weakening. The silence was stirring, and they had far less time to prepare than they had hoped. The expedition team spent 3 weeks inside the threshold, studying the archives left by the architects. What they found was both enlightening and terrifying. The architects had left detailed records of everything: their history, their technology, their understanding of the universe, and most importantly, information about the silence and how to contain it. The song of sealing was not a simple melody. It was a complex harmonic pattern that had to be performed by millions of voices simultaneously, each one resonating with the primordial tone. The mathematics behind it were staggering. The song had to create a frequency wave that would propagate through the quantum fabric of reality itself, reinforcing the dimensional barriers that kept the silence imprisoned. It's like trying to repair a dam while water is pouring through, Dr. Elena Vasquez, one of Earth's quantum physicists, explained during a briefing. The seals are barriers between dimensions. As they weaken, the silence leaks through. The song creates a resonance that strengthens the dimensional membrane, but it has to be perfect. Even a small error could cause the whole thing to collapse. How many voices do we need? Sarah asked. First Scholar, who had been analyzing the architect data, answered. Based on our calculations, we need approximately 7 million voices, all carrying the primordial tone, all singing in perfect synchronization. And from what we have discovered, humanity is the only species that possesses the required frequency in sufficient numbers. Marcus looked up sharply. Wait, you're saying no other species has the primordial tone? Some do in limited ways, First Scholar explained. We have found 17 other species across the galaxy that show traces of the frequency in their communication methods. But none possess it as purely or as strongly as humanity. It seems the evolutionary path that led to human vocal cords was the most direct expression of the architect's design. You are, in essence, the primary inheritors of their voice. 7 million people, Sarah said slowly, doing the math in her head. That's achievable. Earth has billions, but teaching them all the song of sealing, getting them to perform it simultaneously with perfect accuracy, it is a monumental task, Velmoth agreed, but necessary, because we have checked the status of the seals, and what we found is not encouraging. A holographic display appeared, showing the dimensional barriers that separated their universe from the pocket dimension, where the silence was imprisoned. The barriers were depicted as glowing energy fields, but even to Sarah's untrained eye, she could see the dark spots, the places where the light was fading. The seals are failing faster than the architects predicted, First Scholar said. They were designed to last another 1,000 years at minimum, but something has accelerated their decay. We estimate we have less than 5 years before they collapse completely. The room fell silent. 5 years to organize 7 million people, teach them an impossibly complex song, and perform it perfectly. It seemed impossible. Then the first star died. The news came 3 days after the expedition returned to the spiral assembly. A star in Sector 891, a young yellow sun similar to Earth's, had simply ceased to exist, not exploded in a supernova, not collapsed into a black hole, but vanished. One moment it was there, blazing in the darkness, and the next moment there was nothing. Not even radiation, not even gravitational effects, just an absolute void where the star had been. This is the silence, First Scholar confirmed, examining the data. It is leaking through the weakened seals, consuming matter and energy, erasing them from existence, and it will continue to spread, slowly at first but accelerating as the seals weaken further. The galactic community reacted with predictable panic. Some species wanted to evacuate the galaxy entirely, fleeing to distant regions of the universe. Others proposed trying to destroy or contain the silence with weapons. A few even suggested surrendering humanity to it, hoping it would be satisfied with consuming the species that carried the primordial tone. This last suggestion triggered heated debates in the council chambers. A faction calling themselves the Concordat argued that humanity was too dangerous, that their very existence had awakened the silence, and that the galaxy would be safer if they were eliminated. They carry the frequency that created the universe, argued a Concordat representative, a being from a species called the Jar, but they also carry the responsibility for this disaster. The architect's plan failed. They should not have tried to resurrect themselves. They should have let their civilization die with their universe. Sarah stood to respond, feeling anger surge through her. We did not ask for this. We did not know what we were. And now you want to kill 7 billion innocent people because we carry genetic echoes of a civilization that died 8 billion years ago? That's not justice, that's murder. It is survival, the Jar shot back. Your species is the key that unlocked the prison. Perhaps removing the key will reseal it. Or perhaps it will ensure that the seals fail completely and we all die, Rez interjected, his crystalline form vibrating with intensity. The architects left clear instructions. The Song of Sealing requires voices that carry the primordial tone. Humanity possesses these voices. Killing them eliminates our only chance of containing the silence. The debate raged for days. Meanwhile, more stars died. A dozen, then 100, then 1,000. The silence was spreading, moving through space in a pattern that suggested terrible intelligence. It was not consuming randomly. It was expanding its reach strategically, targeting areas with high concentrations of stellar mass, growing stronger with each star it erased. The keepers performed constant calculations, trying to predict the silence's movements. Their projections were grim. At current rates of expansion, the silence would reach inhabited space within 2 years. Within 5 years, it would have consumed a quarter of the galaxy. Within 10, the entire universe would be at risk. We do not have time for political debates, First Scholar announced to the council. Humanity must begin preparation immediately. We will help them learn the Song of Sealing, and the rest of you must decide. Will you support this effort, or will you let fear and prejudice doom us all? Earth's government made their position clear. They would do whatever was necessary to save the universe, even if it meant putting millions of their citizens at risk. The Song of Sealing would require people to gather in massive numbers, all in one location, making them vulnerable. But the alternative was extinction. Sarah returned to Earth for the first time in months, landing at the new spaceport that had been built to accommodate alien vessels. The world she found was dramatically changed. Everyone knew about the silence now. Everyone knew about humanity's true nature as the reborn architects, and everyone knew that the survival of the universe might depend on ordinary people, learning to sing a song that had been composed by ancient beings billions of years ago. The training began immediately. The keepers provided holographic instructors and advanced teaching technology. The Song of Sealing was broken down into component parts, with each part practiced separately before being combined. It was like learning a symphony, except this symphony was written in mathematics and quantum harmonics, and hitting a wrong note could cause dimensional collapse. Sarah spent her days traveling between training centers, encouraging participants, answering questions, and dealing with the logistics of organizing the largest coordinated effort in human history. She spent her nights studying the architect archives, trying to understand the being she apparently carried within her genetic code. The pressure was immense. Every day brought news of more stars consumed by the silence. Every day brought protests from factions within humanity who didn't want to participate, who feared the Song of Sealing was a trick or a trap. Every day brought threats from the Concordat, who had grown bolder in their opposition. 3 months into the training, disaster struck. A Concordat strike team infiltrated one of the major training centers in Mumbai and attempted to plant bombs that would have killed thousands. They were stopped, but not before several people died in the fighting. Sarah confronted the Concordat representatives at an emergency council session, her voice shaking with rage. You claim you're trying to protect the galaxy, but you're sabotaging our only chance at survival. Every person you kill is one less voice for the Song of Sealing. Every day you delay us is one more day for the silence to grow stronger. You're not protecting anyone. You're ensuring our extinction. We are trying to prevent you from making things worse, the Jar responded. What if the Song of Sealing fails? What if your attempt to reinforce the seals instead destroys them completely? The architects failed once already. Why should we trust their plan now? Because we have no other option, Sarah shouted. The Keepers have analyzed every possibility. Every weapon we have is useless against the silence. It exists outside our physical laws. The only thing that can affect it is the primordial tone, properly channeled through the Song of Sealing. If you have a better plan, present it now. Otherwise, stop trying to kill the people who are trying to save you. The Concordat had no alternative plan. They had only fear and anger. But fear and anger could be powerful motivators, and Sarah knew the threat they posed would not disappear easily. As months passed, the training continued. 7 million volunteers drawn from every continent and culture on Earth worked tirelessly to master the song. Some were professional singers. Others were teachers, scientists, soldiers, farmers, or students. What they had in common was their willingness to try, to stand against an impossible threat with nothing but their voices. The Keepers were impressed by human determination. We have seen many species face extinction, First Scholar told Sarah during one of their meetings. Most collapse into panic or despair. Your species is different. You face the impossible and respond by working harder. We're stubborn, Sarah said with a tired smile. It's one of our less admirable traits usually, but in this case maybe it's what we need. By the end of the first year, the 7 million volunteers could perform the Song of Sealing adequately. Not perfectly, but adequately. The question was whether adequate would be enough. The Keeper scientists had been studying the silence's nature, trying to understand what they were dealing with. What they discovered was both fascinating and horrifying. The silence was not just a force or an entity. It was a concept made manifest. It was entropy itself, the inevitable heat death of the universe given consciousness and will. In the old universe, after trillions of years, entropy had won, Dr. Vasquez explained after reviewing the Keeper data. Everything had decayed. All energy had been expended. All matter had broken down. And in that final state, somehow the entropy itself became aware. It became the silence, an entity whose only purpose is to consume everything that exists and return it to nothing. So how do we fight something like that? Marcus asked. You can't fight the concept of entropy. The architects found a way, First Scholar said. They created a new universe with modified physical laws, laws that made entropy slower, more controlled. And they created the dimensional barriers to keep the old entropy, the silence, locked away. The Song of Sealing doesn't destroy the silence. It simply reinforces the barriers, keeps the two forms of entropy separate. But eventually, won't entropy win anyway? Someone asked. Even in this universe, eventually everything will decay. Yes, First Scholar admitted. In trillions of years, this universe too will face heat death. But the architects left information about that as well. They believed that long before that happened, life and intelligence would have evolved to the point where they could create a new universe again, continuing the cycle. Each universe teaches the next how to survive a little longer. It is not perfect. It is not eternal, but it is survival. As the second year began, the silence had consumed over 1 million stars. Entire regions of space were now dark voids, erased from existence. The monster was approaching inhabited space, and panic was spreading throughout the galactic community. More species began to turn against humanity. The Concordat grew bolder, now openly calling for Earth to be destroyed before the Song of Sealing could be attempted. They argued that the risk of failure was too great, and that the attempt might actually make things worse. The Keepers, the Vexithari, and several other ancient species stood firm in their support of the plan, but they were facing increasing opposition. The galactic community was fracturing, fear driving wedges between civilizations that had coexisted peacefully for millennia. Sarah knew they were running out of time. The volunteers were as ready as they would ever be. The stage was set. a massive resonance chamber built in space beyond Earth's moon, capable of amplifying and focusing the voices of 7 million people. All that remained was to bring everyone together and attempt the song. But first, they had to survive the attacks that were surely coming. The Concordat would not allow the attempt without trying to stop it, and Sarah suspected that when the moment came, when 7 million humans gathered in one place to save the universe, they would be at their most vulnerable. She held a meeting with Earth's military leaders and the Keeper security forces. We need to protect the singers at all costs. If the Concordat attacks during the performance, we cannot stop. Once the song begins, it has to be completed, or the partial harmonics could destabilize the dimensional barriers even further. We understand, General Morrison said. We'll establish defensive perimeters. But Ambassador, you need to understand. If the Concordat is determined enough, if they bring enough firepower, we might not be able to stop them. This could become the largest battle in human history, and it will happen while our people are singing a song to save the universe. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. 7 million voices, 7 million lives. The fate of the universe balanced on their ability to sing in perfect harmony while potentially under attack. Then we make sure every voice counts, she said quietly. Because if we fail, there won't be a history to remember us by. There won't be anything at all. The day of the song arrived with a sunrise that 7 billion people watched with mixed hope and dread. Across Earth, families said goodbye to the volunteers who would be traveling to the resonance chamber. 7 million people, leaving behind everyone they loved, knowing they might not return. The chamber itself was a marvel of combined technology. The Keepers had built the core structure, a massive sphere that floated in space beyond the moon. Inside, platforms had been arranged in precise geometric patterns, each one designed to hold 1,000 singers. The mathematics of the placement was crucial. Each voice had to be positioned exactly right for the harmonics to combine properly. Sarah stood at the central platform, looking out at the assembled singers as they arrived in waves of transport ships. People of every age and background, united by their willingness to try. She saw elderly women who had sung in church choirs their whole lives. She saw young teenagers who had learned the song with the adaptability of youth. She saw scientists who approached it as mathematics, and artists who approached it as music, and ordinary people who approached it as the only hope they had. The defensive perimeter around the chamber was the most heavily fortified position humanity had ever created. Warships from Earth and allied alien species formed concentric rings of protection. Sensor arrays watched for any sign of Concordat attack. And on the surface of the moon, weapons installations pointed outward, ready to defend against any threat. All singers are in position, Marcus reported. He had volunteered to be one of the conductors, helping to coordinate the massive performance. We have 7,300,000 voices ready. That's above minimum requirement. Good, Sarah said, though her stomach was churning with anxiety. Any sign of the Concordat? Long-range sensors detected a fleet assembling near Jupiter, General Morrison reported from the command ship. We estimate at least 200 Concordat vessels, plus mercenary ships they've hired. They're preparing for a major assault. Sarah had expected this, but hearing it confirmed still sent a chill through her. When will they arrive? Approximately 2 hours after we begin the song. We'll have to hold them off for at least 4 hours total. The song cannot be interrupted once it starts. 4 hours of singing while under attack. 4 hours of maintaining perfect harmony while ships exploded around them, and lives were lost defending them. It seemed impossible, but then, everything about this situation was impossible. First Scholar appeared beside her, the ancient Keeper's form pulsing with what Sarah had learned to recognize as determination. The silence has consumed 5 million stars now. We have detected it approaching the outer colonies of 17 different species. This is our last chance. If the song fails, there will be no second attempt. Then we don't fail, Sarah said simply. The final preparations took another hour. Each singer was fitted with a neural interface that would help them maintain synchronization. The Keepers had designed the system to connect all 7 million voices into a single network, allowing them to feel the harmony as a collective experience rather than struggling to match it individually. Sarah activated her own interface and felt the connection establish. Suddenly she was aware of millions of other minds all linked together, all feeling the same nervous anticipation she felt. It was overwhelming and beautiful at the same time. "All systems ready," Marcus reported. "We can begin on your signal." Sarah took a deep breath and opened a communication channel that reached every singer in the chamber. "I know you're all scared. I am too. But I want you to remember something. The architects, the beings who created this universe, who gave us this voice, they survived the death of an entire cosmos. They faced absolute extinction and responded by creating something new, something beautiful. We carry their legacy within us, not just in our genetics, but in our spirit. We are survivors. We are creators. And today we're going to prove that the universe was right to trust us. Let's begin." The Song of Sealing started softly, almost imperceptibly, a low harmonic tone that came from 7 million throats simultaneously, resonating with the fundamental frequency of creation. The neural interfaces helped, but it still required incredible concentration. Each singer had to find their note, hold it steady, and blend it with millions of others. Sarah sang her part, feeling the harmony build around her. The song was not like any music humans had ever created. It was mathematics made audible, quantum mechanics expressed through voice. As the harmony grew, reality itself began to respond. The space around the chamber started to shimmer. The keeper instruments detected dimensional frequencies aligning. Far away at the edges of the universe where the barriers between dimensions were weakest, the song's effects were beginning to manifest. The weakened seals were responding, starting to reinforce. "It's working," Dr. Vasquez reported from her monitoring station. "The dimensional barriers are stabilizing, but we need to maintain this for at least 4 hours for the effect to be permanent." They had been singing for 20 minutes when the Concordat fleet arrived. 200 ships appeared at the edge of the defensive perimeter, weapons charged and ready. The Concordat had brought everything they could muster. Ships from dozens of species united by fear and the belief that humanity's attempt would doom them all. "All defensive units, engage," General Morrison ordered. "Do not let them through." The battle began, and it was like nothing humanity had ever experienced. Ships exchanged fire at ranges of thousands of kilometers, their weapons too powerful for Sarah to even comprehend. She saw flashes of light as vessels were destroyed on both sides. She saw the defensive lines holding, then bending, then nearly breaking under the Concordat assault. But the song continued. 7 million voices maintaining their harmony, even as explosions lit up the space around them. The neural interface helped them stay synchronized, but it also meant they all felt each other's fear and determination. Sarah heard the song strengthen as singers pushed through their terror. She felt the collective will of humanity refusing to break, refusing to fail, and she understood in that moment what the architects had seen in the species they would become. Not strength or power, but the stubborn refusal to give up even when facing the impossible. An hour into the song, the Concordat broke through the outer defensive perimeter. 3 of their battleships made it past the initial lines and opened fire on the resonance chamber itself. The chamber's shields held, but barely. Sarah felt the structure shake around them. Several platforms were damaged, and she knew people had been injured or killed. But the song did not stop. The injured singers were replaced by backups, and the harmony held. "We have reports from the barrier zones," First Scholar announced. "The seals are strengthening significantly. The silence's advance has slowed. We need approximately 3 more hours. 3 more hours." Sarah didn't know if they could hold that long. The Concordat was throwing everything at them, and the defensive forces were taking heavy casualties. She saw ships she recognized, vessels crewed by species who had become allies and friends, destroyed in flashes of light. The Vexthari were at the forefront of the defense, their crystalline ships refracting enemy fire and returning it amplified. Resh was commanding one of the lead vessels, and Sarah watched in horror as his ship took a direct hit. The vessel shattered, beautiful crystal fragments spinning away into space. She wanted to scream, to stop singing and mourn, but she couldn't. The song had to continue, so she sang, tears streaming down her face while friends died to protect her. 2 hours into the song, something unexpected happened. The silence itself appeared. It manifested at the edge of the battle, a void of absolute darkness that made the black of space look bright by comparison. Ships that got too close simply ceased to exist, erased from reality without even debris remaining. The fighting stopped as both sides recognized the true enemy. The Concordat fleet, which had been so determined to stop humanity, suddenly found itself facing the very thing they had been afraid of. And they realized too late that Sarah had been right. There was no fighting the silence with weapons. It could only be contained through the song. Some concordant ships turned and fled. But others, seeing the destruction they had caused, understanding the mistake they had made, turned their weapons toward the silence instead. It was futile, their weapons passing through the void without effect, but it was an acknowledgement of their error. The Jar who had led the Concordat appeared on the communication channel, his voice broken. "We were wrong. Forgive us. We will hold the silence back as long as we can." His ship, along with a dozen others, flew directly into the silence, sacrificing themselves to buy time. They were erased instantly, but their sacrifice mattered. It gave humanity time. It gave the song time. 3 hours into the song, Sarah felt something change. The harmony they were creating was no longer just affecting the dimensional barriers. It was resonating with the silence itself. "I'm detecting something impossible," Dr. Vasquez reported, her voice filled with wonder. "The silence is responding to the song, not being pushed back, but changing." Sarah focused on her singing, but she became aware of something. The silence was not mindless destruction. It was entropy, yes, but entropy that had gained awareness. And the primordial tone, the frequency of creation, was reminding it of something it had forgotten. In the old universe, before entropy won, there had been a balance between creation and destruction. New stars formed from the remains of old ones. Life emerged from chemicals formed in stellar furnaces. Death fed new life in an endless cycle. Entropy had not been an enemy then. It had been part of the process, the force that allowed old things to end so new things could begin. But when that universe had died, when everything had finally decayed into nothing, entropy had been alone in the darkness for so long that it had forgotten its purpose. It had become only destruction, only ending, with no memory of what came after. The song was showing it that memory. The primordial tone carried within it the pattern of creation, the reminder that endings were not meaningless if they led to new beginnings. 4 hours into the song, the silence stopped advancing. It hung at the edge of the battle space, no longer consuming, no longer erasing. It seemed to be listening. Sarah felt something shift in the collective consciousness of the singers. They were no longer just reinforcing the barriers. They were offering the silence something different. Not imprisonment, but purpose. Not eternal containment, but a new role to play. The song evolved, moving beyond the patterns the architects had designed. 7 million humans linked together in perfect harmony, improvising something new. They sang of cycles and balance, of death and rebirth, of endings that made room for beginnings. They sang of a universe that would one day grow old and die, but that could be helped into its next iteration gently, peacefully, rather than being torn apart by mindless entropy. They offered the silence a choice: remain what it was, a destroyer trapped in an eternal prison, or remember what it had been, a natural part of the cosmic cycle, not an enemy to be fought, but a force to be guided and directed. And incredibly, impossibly, the silence accepted. The void began to change. The absolute darkness softened, became less absolute. The erasing presence became transformative instead of destructive. Stars that had been consumed were not restored, but the raw matter and energy they had been composed of began to coalesce in new patterns. "The dimensional barriers are stabilizing," First Scholar reported, his voice filled with awe. "But more than that, the silence is integrating with our universe's natural entropy. It is becoming part of the system rather than an external threat." The song continued for another hour, guiding the transformation, helping the silence remember its purpose. And when the song finally ended, when 7 million voices fell silent together, the universe was changed. The silence still existed, but it was no longer the destroyer from the old universe. It had become something new, a force that would help this cosmos eventually transition to its next iteration, trillions of years in the future. Not as an enemy tearing reality apart, but as a guide helping the old universe give birth to the new one. Sarah collapsed onto her platform, exhausted beyond anything she had ever experienced. Around her, 7 million people were doing the same. They had sung for 5 hours straight, maintaining perfect harmony even through battle and death and cosmic transformation. The casualties were heavy. Nearly 1,000 defensive ships had been destroyed. Tens of thousands of personnel from a dozen different species had died protecting the singers. The concordant forces that had sacrificed themselves at the end numbered in the hundreds of ships. But the universe had been saved. As Sarah recovered, As medical teams moved through the chamber helping exhausted singers, First Scholar approached her with news from across the galaxy. "The stars that were consumed are gone," the Keeper said. "But no new stars are being erased. The silence has stopped advancing, and we are detecting something remarkable. In several regions where the silence had created voids, new stellar formation is beginning. Matter is coalescing in patterns we have never seen before. It is as if the silence is now helping create rather than only destroy." Marcus helped Sarah to her feet, his own voice hoarse from singing. "Did we win?" Sarah looked out at the gathered singers, at the ships of allied species maintaining formation, at the space where the silence now existed not as a threat, but as a transformed force. She thought of Rez and all the others who had died to give them time. She thought of the architects and their impossible plan that had somehow worked. "We survived," she said quietly. "And we proved that even the most ancient, most fundamental forces can change." The architects thought they failed because they couldn't stop the silence. But they didn't fail. They just needed us to finish what they started. In the days that followed, the galactic community tried to process what had happened. Humanity was no longer seen as young upstarts or potential threats. They were recognized as the speakers, the heirs to the architects, the ones who carried the voice of creation. The Galactic Council was reformed with humanity at its heart, not as rulers but as guides. Earth became a place of pilgrimage, where species came to learn about the Song of Sealing and the transformation of the silence. The Concordat disbanded in shame, though Sarah argued for forgiveness rather than punishment. They were afraid, she told the council. Fear makes people do terrible things, but some of them gave their lives at the end to help us. We should remember that. A memorial was built in space near the resonance chamber, listing the names of everyone who had died in the battle. Resh was honored with a monument on Earth itself, the first alien to receive such recognition. Sarah spent months traveling between Earth and the Spiral Assembly, helping to establish new protocols and procedures. She worked with scientists studying the transformed silence, with historians recording what had happened, with educators developing programs to teach other species about humanity's unique abilities. One evening, she stood at the same viewing port on the Harmony where she had first seen the Spiral Assembly, what felt like a lifetime ago. Marcus joined her, looking older but more content. I got a message from Earth, he said. They want to know if we're ready to come home. Are we? Sarah asked. Marcus smiled. I don't think home is just Earth anymore. The architects spread themselves across the universe and we're their inheritors. The whole cosmos is our home now. Sarah nodded, feeling the truth of it. They were not the young species The Keepers want to establish an academy, she said, a place where humans can teach others about the primordial tone, about harmonics and resonance, and where we can learn from elder species about all the things we still don't know. Sounds like we'll be busy for the next few centuries, Marcus said with a laugh. Sarah smiled, but then grew serious. First Scholar told me something yesterday. The transformation we achieved with the silence, it wasn't in the architect's original plan. They only knew how to seal it away. We found a better solution because we approached it differently. We were willing to offer it redemption instead of just imprisonment. The architects were brilliant, Marcus said, but they were also old and set in their ways. Maybe that's why their plan required them to be reborn through evolution. They needed the wisdom of experience combined with the flexibility of youth. A transport ship passed by the viewing port, carrying a delegation from one of the younger species. Sarah watched it go, thinking about the future. There would be more challenges ahead. The silence might be transformed, but the universe still held countless mysteries and dangers. New threats would emerge. Old problems would resurface. But now they would face those challenges together. Humanity would not be alone, patronized as primitive children or feared as dangerous weapons. They would be partners with thousands of other species, sharing knowledge and working toward common goals. A communication alert chimed. It was First Scholar, requesting a meeting. Sarah accepted, and the ancient keeper appeared as a holographic projection. Ambassador Chen, I wanted to inform you of something we have discovered in the final sections of the Architect Archives, First Scholar said. There is a message, sealed in a way that could only be opened after the Song of Sealing was successfully performed, and the silence was transformed. What does it say? First Scholar's form pulsed with what Sarah recognized as satisfaction. It is a message of hope. The architects knew they might fail, but they also planned for the possibility of success. They left instructions for the next step in the cosmic cycle, how to help this universe transition peacefully when its time comes, trillions of years from now, how to ensure that the knowledge and wisdom accumulated over the lifetime of this cosmos can be passed on to the next one. Sarah felt a sense of wonder wash over her. The architects had thought so far ahead, planning not just for their own survival, but for the continuation of life and intelligence across multiple universal cycles. There is more, First Scholar continued. The archives contain data about other universes, parallel realities that exist alongside our own. The architects believed that they were not alone, that other civilizations in other dying universes might have attempted similar solutions. There may be other speakers out there, in dimensions adjacent to ours, carrying voices that shape their own realities. Are you suggesting we try to contact them? Eventually, perhaps. But for now, we have work to do in our own universe. The transformation of the silence has created new opportunities for stellar formation, for life to emerge in regions that were previously inhospitable. We have a chance to help guide the next generation of civilizations, to pass on what we have learned. And humanity, as the speakers, will be at the center of that effort. After the conversation ended, Sarah remained at the viewing port, watching the stars. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness between galaxies, the silence was transforming dead matter into the seeds of new stars. The destroyer had become a gardener, preparing the cosmic soil for future growth. She thought about her mother, who had taught her that lullaby so many years ago. Her mother had no idea that the simple melody she sang carried echoes of the universe's birth. She had passed it down simply because it was beautiful, because it connected generations, because it brought comfort in the dark. Perhaps that was the most important thing the architects had encoded in humanity. Not just the primordial tone, but the instinct to create, to share, to pass knowledge and beauty from one generation to the next. That impulse had survived billions of years of evolution, emerging in countless forms across countless worlds. Sarah pulled out her personal communicator and recorded a message to Earth, to her family, to everyone who had supported the mission. "We did it," she said simply. "We saved the universe. But more than that, we changed it. We showed that even the oldest, most fundamental forces can be transformed through understanding and compassion. The architects gave us their voice, but we used it in ways they never imagined. And that, I think, is the real legacy they wanted to leave. Not a fixed plan, but the tools and the spirit to find our own solutions." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "We're going to be busy for a long time. There's so much to do, so much to learn and teach. But we're not carrying this burden alone. We have allies from 1,000 worlds, friends we've made, and partners who stood with us when everything seemed impossible. Together, we're going to build something the architects would be proud of, something that honors their sacrifice while blazing our own trail. I'll be home eventually," she concluded, "but right now my place is here, helping to shape the future we fought so hard to protect. I love you all, and I hope you're as proud of what we accomplished as I am." She ended the recording and sent it. Then she turned from the viewing port and headed to her quarters. Tomorrow would bring new meetings, new challenges, new opportunities. The universe was vast and there was so much work to be done. But tonight, Sarah Chen, ambassador of Earth and speaker for humanity, allowed herself to rest. She had earned it. They all had. As she drifted off to sleep, she hummed that familiar lullaby, the one her mother had taught her. And across the cosmos, in a phenomenon that quantum physicists would spend centuries trying to explain, new stars ignited in response, not because the lullaby commanded them to, but because the universe recognized the voice that had shaped it, the frequency of creation still echoing through reality after 13 billion years. The architects had indeed thought humanity was their heir, but they had not anticipated that their heirs would surpass them, finding solutions they never imagined, transforming enemies they thought could only be imprisoned, and proving that the youngest perspectives combined with the oldest wisdom could achieve the impossible. The universe had thought humanity was young, and they were young, with all the energy and innovation that came with youth, but they were also ancient, carrying within them the voice that had spoken reality into existence. They were both simultaneously, and that paradox was their greatest strength. In the years that followed, humanity would continue to surprise the galaxy. They would find 17 other species that carried traces of the primordial tone and help them develop their abilities. They would establish academies where the art of reality speaking was taught to any species willing to learn. They would explore the mysteries the architects had left behind and add their own discoveries to the cosmic record. And when trillions of years in the future this universe grew old and tired, when the last stars began to fade and entropy threatened to claim everything, humanity's descendants would be there. They would sing the song of transition, guiding the cosmos gently into its next iteration, ensuring that the cycle of creation continued. The architects had survived the death of one universe and created another. Humanity, their strange and wonderful heirs, would ensure that the pattern continued forever. Not through force or domination, but through the simple power of a voice raised in harmony, speaking the language of creation itself. The story of how the universe thought humanity was young, only to discover they were the oldest beings in existence, would be told and retold across 1 billion worlds. It would become the foundation myth of a new age, a reminder that appearances could deceive, that the small and seemingly insignificant could carry within them the power to reshape reality, and that the voice of creation, once given freely, could never truly be silenced. Sarah Chen slept peacefully, dreaming of songs yet to be sung and stars yet to be born, and the universe, listening to the echo of her breath, her heartbeat, her living presence, remembered its own birth and looked forward to all the births yet to come.